Get out of first class right now. Someone like you couldn't possibly afford to sit here. Move it. Or I'm calling security to escort you off. There are mornings that start like a reward, only to turn into a battleground. And then there are moments, rare, breathtaking moments, when the universe decides it has seen enough. This is one of those stories. Before the nightmare unraveled, the terminal at Chicago O'Hare International on that Tuesday morning wore its usual cloak of organized chaos. Announcements blurred together in a mix of languages. Roller bags clicked rhythmically against the polished floors. Strangers clutched their coffees like lifelines. And weaving through the noise was Maya Collins, moving with the quiet poise of someone who had weathered far worse than a crowded airport. Maya was 36, an African-American woman with her natural hair swept up in a neat bun, wearing a tailored burgundy trench coat. To the untrained eye, she looked like any other corporate traveler. But the truth carried a far greater weight. Just 2 days ago, Maya had walked out of a downtown Chicago boardroom after closing a $14 million deal. She was the founder and principal designer of Collins Studio, an urban planning firm she'd built from the ground up over 11 grueling years. The contract, the largest public art project in Houston's history, was hers. Every sleepless night, every ignored call, every meeting where she was the only black woman in the room being talked over or sidelined. It all led to this. She earned every bit of today. To celebrate in her own quiet way, Maya did something she almost never did. She upgraded to a first-class lie-flat suite, Seat 4A, on SkyBridge Flight 31. 4 days without real sleep. Her feet aching inside her leather boots, her mind still buzzing from high-stakes negotiations. All she wanted was 4 hours of peace, a warm blanket, and a chance to finally breathe. At Gate C-22, a bright-eyed gate agent named Devon scanned her boarding pass and flashed a warm smile. "Ms. Collins, you've officially reached Premier Elite status. Congratulations, and enjoy your upgraded flight today." Maya smiled back, a genuine warmth reaching her eyes. "Thank you, Devon. I really need this flight." She walked down the jet bridge, feeling the slight incline beneath her boots, and stepped through the aircraft door into the plush, softly lit world of first class. The scent of warm leather and subtle floral notes welcomed her. The forward cabin exuded quiet luxury, a sanctuary entirely cut off from the chaos she had just left behind. Maya sank into Seat 4A, letting out a long sigh of relief, thinking her battle was finally over. She had no idea that in less than 5 minutes, a power-tripping supervisor would swoop in, rip the boarding pass from her hands, and turn this luxury suite into a theater of public humiliation. Standing just inside the door was the senior flight attendant. Her name tag read Patricia. Patricia Voss was a woman somewhere in her late 50s, with steel-gray hair pulled back so severely it stretched the skin above her temples. She wore the SkyBridge Navy uniform with a kind of rigid ownership, as though the aircraft itself were her personal property, and everyone else was merely a guest she hadn't fully approved of yet. Her lipstick was a precise, unforgiving shade of coral. Her eyes, the moment they landed on Maya, did something subtle but unmistakable. They performed a rapid top-to-bottom evaluation, paused, and narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Main cabin boarding hasn't begun yet." Patricia said it the way people say things they've rehearsed. Smoothly, with a smile stapled to the surface, but with a current of condescension running underneath that could strip paint. "You'll need to wait outside on the jet bridge, sweetheart." Maya stopped. She had heard this kind of tone before. She knew exactly what it was doing. "I'm in first class," she said evenly. "Seat 4A." Patricia's manufactured smile didn't budge. "I find that unlikely. May I see your request?" A demand. Maya extended her phone. Patricia took it, didn't accept it, took it, the way someone confiscates something they expect to be fraudulent, and squinted at the screen. Her manicured nail tapped the glass once, twice, like she was testing whether the image would dissolve. It didn't. The words were clear. First class, seat 4A, Premier Elite, Mea Collines. Patricia handed the phone back without a word of acknowledgement, no apology, no warmth. Just a tight exhale through her nose and a stiff step to the side. "Your bag," she said flatly. "You'll need to check it." "I'm sorry." The overhead bins in this section are for first-class passengers, with priority boarding. You were nearly the last to board in this cabin. There may not be space. Maya looked down at her carry-on. It was a sleek, regulation-sized rolling suitcase, standard dimensions. She had measured it herself before purchasing it 3 years ago specifically to avoid exactly this kind of argument. "This bag meets the size requirements," Maya said, keeping her voice professional and measured. "And I am a first-class passenger." "I'm aware of what you claim," Patricia said, and something in the word claim landed like a stone dropped into still water, rippling outward in ways that weren't subtle at all. "But we need to be practical. There are other passengers." "I just boarded," Maya said again, calmly. "The bin above my seat should be accessible." Patricia's jaw tightened. "I'll decide what's accessible on my aircraft." "My aircraft," Maya held Patricia's gaze for a moment, steady, composed. Then walked past her into the first-class cabin. She found seat 4A easily, a beautiful window position with extra legroom and a personal divider. She lifted her carry-on with one hand, placed it cleanly into the overhead bin above her row, which was empty, and closed the latch with a quiet click. She sat down, she exhaled, she put in her earbuds. But Patricia, as it turned out, had only just started. The cabin filled gradually with the particular breed of quiet wealth that populates first-class cabins on weekday morning flights. Executives in crisp suits, retired professionals in comfortable linen, one older woman in enormous sunglasses who looked like she owned something large and coastal. Younger flight attendant named Claire moved through the rows with pre-departure orange juice and warm towels, her manner genuinely pleasant and light. Maya accepted a glass of juice with a grateful smile, pulled a design brief from her portfolio, and was just beginning to decompress when she felt a presence stop directly beside her row. She looked up. Patricia was standing there, arms crossed, her body angled in a way that declared ownership of the space. And standing just behind her, breathing audibly, was a large man in a rumpled business suit. His face was flushed, his shirt slightly untucked. He was holding 2 pieces of luggage, a massively oversized duffel bag that visibly strained at its seams, and a rigid, hard-sided case that was clearly never going to fit in any overhead bin on any commercial aircraft on the planet. "I need you to move your bag," Patricia said loudly. Not quietly, loudly, at a volume that ensured the 4 rows nearest them could hear every syllable. "Mr. Garrett needs access to the overhead storage." Several heads turned. A woman in row 3 peered over her seat. Maya removed one earbud. She looked at Patricia. She looked at the man. She looked at his luggage. "I'm sorry," she said. "Your bag. I need you to take it down so Mr. Garrett can stow his belongings. He has fragile items." Maya looked at the duffel bag. It was so overpacked, the zipper was visibly struggling. The hard case looked like it belonged in a cargo hold. Both items together were so far outside the carry-on size regulations, it was almost impressive. "His bags exceed the size limits significantly," Maya said, her voice still calm, her eyes not wavering. "My bag doesn't." "Why would I move a compliant bag to make room for non-compliant luggage?" "Because I'm asking you to," Patricia said, dropping the customer service tone entirely now. The mask was coming off, slowly, but it was coming off. "And because Mr. Garrett is a Platinum Plus member with specific accommodation needs." "I'm a Premier Elite member," Maya replied, "which is the highest tier SkyBridge offers, and I was here first. My bag is where it belongs." Patricia leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to something low and pointed like a blade turned at a specific angle. "I don't think you understand the situation you're in," Patricia said. "This is my cabin. When I make a request, passengers comply. That is how this works. Now I am going to ask you one more time to take your bag down." The woman in row 3 had stopped pretending to read. Two men in business suits across the aisle were watching now, with the wide-eyed stillness of people witnessing something they know is wrong, but aren't sure what to do about. Maya set her design brief on the tray table. She took a slow, controlled breath. She had been in rooms that tried to make her feel small. She had sat across tables from people who doubted her intelligence before she opened her mouth. She knew exactly what this was, and she also knew exactly what responding to it with emotion would cost her. "My name is Maya Collins," she said, projecting her voice just enough that it was clear and audible without being aggressive. She looked directly at Patricia's name tag. "Patricia, I have a valid first-class ticket. My bag meets the airline's posted size specifications. I boarded during my designated time and stowed my bag in the bin directly above my assigned seat. I am not checking this bag. It contains my laptop, medication, and $14 million worth of signed client contracts that cannot go into cargo hold." Mr. Garrett shifted uncomfortably. He looked at his own duffel bag, as if suddenly seeing it for the first time. "Look," he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck, "I can probably find space in the back. It's really not." "Mr. Garrett, I've got this handled." Patricia cut him off, sharp and definitive. She turned back to Maya, and whatever remained of the professional veneer dropped away completely now. Her voice went quiet and hard and specific. "You're being difficult. You're making a scene. And if you don't comply with my instructions right now, I am going to have you removed from this aircraft. I am absolutely serious." "You would remove me," Maya said slowly, "for refusing to surrender my regulation-size bag in my assigned overhead bin?" "I would remove you," Patricia said, "for being non-compliant with crew instructions. That is a federal matter. Do not test me." The cabin had gone very, very quiet. In seat 2A, 2 rows ahead of Maya, positioned at the very front of the first-class section, a man had been sitting with the calm, practiced stillness of someone who had spent decades learning how to observe without being observed. He was in his early 60s, silver-haired, dressed in a charcoal gray merino crewneck and dark trousers. No suit jacket, no visible corporate signage. He held a paperback novel, but he had stopped reading it. His name was James Whitfield, and he heard every single word. He reached into the pocket of his trousers and removed a phone. He typed one message, 12 words. He pressed send and set the phone face down on his tray table. Then he picked up his book and turned the page. Back in row 4, Maya did something that Patricia clearly had not anticipated. She reached into her portfolio, removed her phone, opened the voice memo application, and pressed record. She set it face up on her armrest, visible and deliberate. "Patricia," Maya said, her voice clear and unhurried, like someone dictating a legal document. "I want to make sure the record is complete. I am seated in my assigned seat, 4A. I have not raised my voice. I have not threatened anyone. I have refused to gate check a regulation carry-on bag being stored in my assigned overhead bin. And you are threatening to have me forcibly removed from this aircraft for that refusal. Is that an accurate summary of what's happening?" Patricia's eyes locked onto the phone on the armrest. Something changed in her face. The color shifted, not a blush. Something colder, a flash of recognition that things had escalated beyond what she'd planned. But then the recognition hardened into something uglier, and she made the worst decision of her morning. "Put that away," she hissed. "I'm documenting this interaction for my own protection," Maya said. "I have every legal right to do so." "You are creating a hostile environment," Patricia said, her voice rising now, sharp enough to turn heads in the main cabin where early boarding had just begun. "You are threatening crew safety. You are interfering with flight preparation. I feel unsafe. I feel physically threatened, and I am calling the captain right now." "There is nothing threatening about a woman sitting in her seat holding a phone," Maya said. But Patricia had already turned and was marching up the aisle with the urgent theatrics of a woman who knew exactly how to play this particular card. Mr. Garrett, who had watched the entire exchange with mounting horror, quietly picked up his duffel bag and his hard case and retreated toward the back of the plane without a word. He wanted absolutely no part of what was coming. Claire, the younger flight attendant, passed Maya's row on some small errand and met her eyes for a split second, a look that lasted less than a breath but contained volumes. "I'm sorry, I can't, I'm so sorry," and kept moving. Maya sat with her hands flat on the armrests. Her heartbeat was loud in her own ears. She was furious. She was frightened. She was exhausted in the specific grinding way that comes not from lack of sleep, but from having to fight for your basic dignity in public for the 100th time in your life. She breathed. 4 counts in, hold, 6 counts out. She was not going to give Patricia anything to use against her. The minutes that passed were some of the longest of her life. Then she heard them, heavy footsteps on the jet bridge, and then 2 figures filled the cabin doorway. Uniformed officers, both large, both moving with the clipped efficiency of people who'd been told there was an emergency. Officer Reyes and Officer Dunbar, both from the Airport Security Division. Patricia intercepted them at the galley, her back to the cabin, but her gestures were visible, hands pressed to her chest, fingers pointing back toward row 4. The whole performance choreographed with the precision of long practice. Aggressive. Refused compliance. Made me feel unsafe. Could be a threat. Officer Reyes walked down the aisle with the careful authority of a man who has done this before. He stopped at Maya's row. He looked at her, sitting completely still, hands visible, earbuds out, eyes calm. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to collect your belongings, remove your bag from the overhead bin, and come with us to the gate area." "Officer," Maya said, and her voice didn't shake. She had practiced keeping her voice from shaking for years. "I have done nothing wrong. I am sitting in my assigned seat. I refuse to check a compliant bag. That is the complete and total nature of this situation. I am not a threat." "The flight crew has made a determination," Officer Reyes said. "The captain has authorized your removal." "I have the entire interaction on audio," Maya said. "Every word." "That's something you can raise at the gate, ma'am." His voice wasn't unkind, but it was immovable. "Right now, you need to exit the aircraft." "If she refuses," Officer Dunbar added, stepping closer, "we will need to detain her." The word detain landed like a dropped temperature. Several passengers flinched. "This is outrageous," said an older man in row 3. His voice was gruff and indignant. "She hasn't done a single thing wrong. I watched the whole thing. That flight attendant went after her the minute she stepped on this plane. She's been completely calm." A woman in row 5 said, louder now, her voice carrying. "The attendant provoked her. That's what happened." "People plea," said Officers Reyes said, raising a hand. "This is not something we settle on the aircraft." Patricia had followed the officers back down the aisle and was standing just behind them, her arms folded, her expression that of a woman watching an unpleasant task she assigned get executed exactly as planned. Maya looked at Officer Dunbar's hand resting near his belt. She looked at the aisle. She looked at the faces around her, the indignant older man, the sympathetic woman, the 2 businessmen in silent, helpless fury, and she felt the weight of the calculation she was being forced to make in real time. If she resisted, she would be the story, not Patricia. She reached for her seatbelt. "Fine," she said, barely above a whisper. "I'll go." The word tasted like ash in her mouth. Patricia's expression broke into something that wasn't quite a smile but lived in that same neighborhood, a tight, private satisfaction the quiet triumph of someone who has gotten exactly what they came for. Maya reached up to retrieve her bag. "That won't be necessary." The voice was quiet, unhurried, but it carried the specific gravity of someone who has never once needed to raise their voice to make a room stop breathing. Everyone turned. James Whitfield had set his book down, unbuckled his seatbelt, and stepped into the aisle. He stood between Officer Reyes and Maya's row with the measured ease of a man who has occupied the most important chair in rooms that would make these officers' heads spin. "Sir," Officer Reyes said, straightening instinctively, "I need you to return to your seat and stay out of. I'll need about 45 seconds of your time," Whitfield said pleasantly. "That's all." He reached into the inner pocket of his merino sweater and removed a card. Not a business card. A matte black metal card, thick, heavy, with a holographic SkyBridge Airlines logo embossed at the center. He handed it to Officer Reyes. Officer Reyes looked at the card. He read it. He read it again. His face underwent a slow, visible transformation, the kind that begins with confusion and moves through disbelief before arriving at something very close to dread. "My name is James Whitfield," the man said softly. "I am the chairman and principal owner of SkyBridge Airlines. I hold controlling interest in this company. I employ your dispatch supervisor. I employ the captain of this aircraft. And I have been seated 4 feet from that woman for the past 40 minutes, witnessing this situation from its very beginning." The cabin had stopped breathing. Patricia's arms had fallen from their folded position. She stood utterly still, her face in the process of rearranging itself from triumph to something that had no comfortable name. James Whitfield turned to look at her. It was not an angry look. It was worse than angry. It was the look of someone for whom anger has long since been replaced by something quieter and more permanent, a kind of cold, absolute clarity that leaves no room for negotiation or excuse. "Patricia," he said. Her name in his mouth sounded like a door being closed. "Mr. Whitfield." Her voice had gone thin. The militant authority was completely gone. What replaced it was small and cracking, like plaster on a wall that's been rained on too long. Sir, please." "There has been a terrible misunderstanding. I was trying to manage a difficult situation. She was being non-compliant. She was recording me without consent. She was making other passengers uncomfortable." "Patricia," he said again, quieter this time. "I watched you block this woman at the galley before she had taken 2 steps onto this aircraft. I watched you question her boarding pass after it cleared the scanner without issue. I watched you attempt to take her property without grounds. I watched you demand she surrender overhead bin space she secured legally and on time to accommodate a passenger whose luggage was so obviously out of compliance. I counted 3 separate policy violations from where I was sitting. And then I watched you call law enforcement. I watched you use the words physically threatened in reference to a woman who had not once left her seat or raised her voice." He paused. The cabin was absolutely silent. A baby had been fussing somewhere in the back of the plane. It had gone quiet too. "You did all of that," Whitfield continued, "while wearing my airline's uniform. You did it deliberately, and you did it because of who she is and what you assumed that meant about where she belonged. And you would have succeeded in destroying her morning, her record, and her dignity if I had been sitting anywhere else on this plane." Patricia opened her mouth. "Don't," Whitfield said. She closed it. He turned to Officer Reyes. "Officer, I want to be as clear as I possibly can be. Miss Collins has committed no infraction of any kind. She has been the model of composure under circumstances that would have broken most people in this cabin. If you review the audio recording she has on her phone, which I hope she kept running, you will hear that for yourself. The person in this cabin who made a fraudulent report, who invented a safety threat that doesn't exist, and used your emergency response resources to execute a personal act of discrimination, is standing right behind you. Officer Reyes turned slowly to look at Patricia. Officer Dunbar had not moved, but something in his posture had shifted. His hand was no longer near his belt. Both officers were now looking at Patricia with an entirely different kind of attention. "Ms. Voss," Officer Reyes said, and his voice had changed register entirely. "Did you place a Code 3 emergency call regarding this passenger?" Patricia's mouth opened and closed, twice with nothing coming out. "Yes or no, ma'am," Officer Dunbar said. I reported a non-compliant passenger who was... Did you characterize her as physically threatening?" A pause so long it had its own weight. "Yes." Knowing that to be false. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the cabin. The forward galley door swung open. A man in a SkyBridge operations blazer, breathing hard, clipboard in hand, shoved through the narrow space. His name was Stephen Park, director of O'Hare Hub Operations. He looked like he had sprinted from the other end of the terminal. His collar was damp. "Mr. Whitfield." He practically skidded to a halt. "Sir," I came immediately. Whitfield didn't look away from Patricia. "Stephen, what is our current policy regarding a SkyBridge employee who initiates a false security emergency to weaponize law enforcement against a paying passenger?" Stephen Park's eyes swept the scene. They landed on Patricia. They dropped to the officers. They found Maya still sitting in seat 4A, and something moved across his face. Recognition, horror, and the immediate desire to do the right thing very publicly. "Immediate termination," Stephen said. "Confiscation of credentials. Permanent ban from all secured areas of SkyBridge-operated facilities. And mandatory referral to legal for review of the incident." "We'll start there," Whitfield said. Then he turned back to Patricia one final time. "Patricia, you are terminated, effective at this moment. I want your wings and your ID. Lanyard handed to Stephen right now, in front of these officers and these passengers." The scream that came out of Patricia Voss was not dignified. It was raw and desperate and ugly in the way that all things look when the performance finally cracks open and what's underneath spills out. "You cannot do this to me," she shrieked, her voice jumping an octave and shattering the careful quiet of the cabin like something thrown through glass. "I have been with this airline for 26 years. 26 years. I have union protection. I have seniority. I have rights. You cannot fire me on an airplane. You can't. That's not legal. I am the majority owner of this airline," Whitfield said without inflection. "I can terminate your employment anywhere on Earth where our aircraft are present. That is every country in which we operate. Your union has already been notified via the message I sent from my seat while you were inventing your story for the officers. My union has seen the audio. Stephen, can you confirm?" Stephen was already reading his phone. Union rep just responded. "They're declining to represent." Quote, "We reviewed the recording shared by the chairman's office. The conduct described falls outside the scope of union protection." Patricia's face crumpled. Then it reconstructed itself into fury. "She started this," Patricia snarled, pointing at Maya. The composure was completely gone now. The voice, the bearing, the rigid professionalism, all of it had collapsed. What remained was exposed and furious and frightened. "She started this the second she walked onto my plane looking like she. Stop." Whitfield's voice dropped to something below normal volume. It was more effective than shouting. "Finish that sentence, Patricia, and our legal team will add a defamation claim to everything else you're facing. Do not finish it." She stopped. Her finger was still pointed at Maya. Slowly, with the mechanical motion of something winding down, she lowered it. "Your ID," Stephen said quietly, stepping forward. "And your wings." Patricia's hands shook as she reached for the pin on her lapel. Her fingers fumbled. For a moment, she couldn't get it unclasped, and the sight of that fumbling, the great, invincible Patricia Voss unable to remove her own badge, was somehow more devastating than anything else that had happened in the past hour. She got it free. She slapped it into Stephen's open hand with a violence that was more performance than power. She unclipped her ID. She looked at it for one moment. The lanyard, the badge, 26 years of a career distilled into a piece of laminated plastic, and she threw it. It hit Stephen in the chest and fell to the floor. "Get out of my way," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm leaving, ma'am." Officer Reyes stepped forward with practiced calm, and his voice had regained every ounce of authority that had briefly wobbled. "You're not leaving alone. You initiated a false emergency report using Federal Aviation communication channels. The misuse of emergency dispatch at an international airport is a criminal matter. We'll need you to come with us to the precinct for formal booking." Patricia turned on him. "I am a victim here. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. Don't you touch me." She made the catastrophic mistake of physically pushing Officer Dunbar's hand away. It was the worst thing she could have done. What followed was fast, efficient, and inexorable. Officer Reyes moved behind her, Officer Dunbar controlled her arms, and with the cold mechanical click of metal on metal, the handcuffs closed around Patricia Voss's wrists. She cried out. She struggled. She sobbed. She said words that were not appropriate and would not be repeated in polite company. None of it changed anything. As the officers walked her up the aisle toward the forward door, the cabin watched in silence. Several passengers had their phones out. Patricia kept her face down, her tight silver hair disheveled now, her uniform pulled askew, her tears cutting channels through her coral lipstick. She passed Maya's row without looking at her. She disappeared through the cabin door. The jet bridge swallowed her footsteps. And then the cabin, all of it, let out a breath. Somewhere in the middle of the aircraft, a single person began to clap. Then another. Then 4 more. And within 5 seconds, the entire first-class section and the visible forward rows of business class were applauding. Not the scattered, obligatory clapping of a safe landing, but the full, cathartic, unified release of people who had been holding their breath through something that felt deeply, viscerally wrong and had just watched it become right. Maya sat in seat 4A with her hands folded in her lap, her eyes bright. A tear moved down one cheek. She didn't wipe it. She had earned that tear. James Whitfield stepped up to her row. His expression had shifted entirely from the boardroom authority of 2 minutes ago. He looked, now, like a man who was simply tired of witnessing unnecessary cruelty and relieved to have been in a position to stop it. "Miss Collins," he said quietly, "are you all right?" She started, stopped, pressed her lips together. "I will be. Thank you. I was about to walk off this plane, I know." He said it simply, no fanfare. "May I sit for a moment?" The seat next to her, 4B, was empty. She nodded. He sat down and looked at her with the directness of someone who doesn't waste time on preamble. "What Patricia did today is a failure of this company's culture," he said. "It doesn't begin and end with her. It begins with me, with what kind of environment I've allowed to exist. She felt entitled to do what she did. That entitlement was cultivated somewhere, and that is something I'm going to deal with thoroughly and publicly." "I appreciate that," Maya said. "I'd like to ask you something, and you can tell me it's none of my business." She raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead." "You mentioned contracts in your carry-on. $14 million, you said." Maya glanced down at the rolling suitcase in the bin above them. A quiet, private kind of pride moved across her face. "The Houston Cultural Arts District Commission," she said. "My firm just closed it. We're designing the new Central Arts Campus. Galleries, performance spaces, a public garden. It's been 6 months in development." Whitfield was quiet for a moment. Something shifted behind his eyes. "I know that project," he said. "I know it well. The Houston Planning Council has been talking about that commission for 2 years. He paused. "The Collins Studio. That's your firm." "It is." He leaned back slightly. looked at the bulkhead, tapped one finger against the armrest in a slow, thoughtful rhythm. SkyBridge is in the early stages of a complete terminal redesign at Dallas-Fort Worth, he said, his voice shifting into a cadence that Maya recognized immediately, not CEO to passenger but client to architect. We have rejected 4 proposals in the last 2 months. All of them were technically sound. None of them had a vision. None of them understood that an airport terminal is not just infrastructure. It is the first and last thing a person experiences when they arrive in or leave a city. It is the threshold of memory. Maya turned to look at him fully. We want sustainable material integration, he continued. We want public art built into the architecture from the foundation level, not bolted on afterward. We want it to feel like Texas, like the actual Texas, not a theme park version of it. He paused. I don't know why I'm telling you this right now, because you were watching me argue for my blueprints 45 minutes ago, Maya said, and something connected. Then he smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his face into something warmer and more human than the contained authority of the past hour. Something like that. He reached into his pocket and produced a card. Plain, matte, a name, a number, and a title in clean embossed letters. My direct line, he said. When you land in Houston, when you've had time to rest and decompress, not before, you've earned the rest. I would like your firm to consider submitting a proposal for the DFW redesign. It is a $1.8 billion project. I want the architect who designed the Houston Arts District to tell us what the gateway to Dallas should look like. Maya took the card. She looked at it for a long moment. She thought about this morning. The conference room in Chicago. 6 months of fighting for a seat at the table. The boarding gate and Devon who had called her by name. The jet bridge. Patricia's eyes running down the length of her, deciding. The moment she had reached for her seatbelt in defeat, she thought about the woman she had been at 7 this morning, and the woman she was at whatever time it was now. I'll call you Monday, she said. The replacement senior purser arrived with the quiet efficiency of someone fully briefed and deeply committed to rehabilitation. Her name was Angela. She moved through the cabin with the kind of genuine warmth that had clearly not been manufactured. It was simply who she was. She spoke to every passenger in first class individually. She remembered names. She was funny and precise and professional in all the ways that mattered. When the announcement came that the aircraft was finally cleared to push back, the collective sigh of relief was almost audible. As the Boeing departed the gate and moved along the taxiway toward the runway, the heavy, dark atmosphere that Patricia Voss had constructed over the past hour began to dissolve like fog lifting off water. People spoke to each other. The older man in row 3 caught Maya's eye across the aisle and gave her a nod. The slow, firm nod of someone communicating something that doesn't require words. She nodded back. The engines built to a roar. The aircraft lifted, pressing everyone gently into their seats, and Chicago's sprawling grid fell away below the clouds. Maya looked out the window. She breathed. She let her eyes close. She had boarded this plane exhausted and cautious and tightly wound, braced for exactly the kind of thing that had happened. And she had come through it. Not because someone had rescued her. She had held her ground, recorded her evidence, refused to be made invisible. But yes, also, because a man in a gray sweater had been paying attention. That was the complicated thing about days like this one. They were never simple stories. They were layered things, full of what-ifs and what might-have-beens. And they ended differently, depending on too many variables that shouldn't matter, but did. She was grateful, and she was furious, both at the same time, and that, too, was human. At cruising altitude, Angela brought a glass of champagne. Not standard issue, something in a narrower flute, with a small card propped against the stem. The card read, in handwritten ink, from Mr. Whitfield, well deserved. Congratulations on your commission. Maya held the glass for a moment before drinking. She thought about $14 million and blueprints and the Houston skyline. She thought about $1.8 billion and a terminal in Dallas that didn't exist yet. She thought about what it would look like when she built it. The plane cut westward through a clear November sky. On the ground, things were unraveling for Patricia Voss with the particular swiftness that the digital age reserves for its most public humiliations. 3 passengers in first class had been recording from the moment Patricia raised her voice. The clearest footage, 3 minutes and 42 seconds, shot from the aisle seat of row 3, had been uploaded from the terminal's Wi-Fi before the doors had even closed. By the time Flight 3 summon was over Missouri, the video was approaching 4 million views. By the time it crossed into Texas, it was the top trending topic on every major social media platform in the country. The comments moved in waves. First outrage, then analysis, then the kind of collective moral satisfactions that comes when a story delivers something the world rarely gets. Consequence, swift and visible and proportionate. Patricia Voss sat in a holding room at O'Hare's security precinct. Her uniform jacket hanging off one shoulder, her carefully maintained hair collapsed. The mascara she'd applied that morning now charting its way down her face in dark rivers. She had been formally booked, fingerprinted, photographed. She stared at the wall. They gave her one phone call. She called her sister Carol because she could not bring herself to call her husband. Carol answered on the first ring. "Pat, I've been watching the news." "Carol, it's on every channel." Carol's voice was not warm. It was careful. The carefulness of someone deciding how much honesty is appropriate for this moment. "The video is, Pat, it's bad. It's really bad. I was trying to do my job. That woman was sitting in her seat," Carol said quietly. "I've watched the video 4 times. She never raised her voice once." A pause. "Did you really say people like you?" Patricia closed her eyes. "Pat, did you?" The silence was its own kind of answer. Carol exhaled slowly on the other end of the line. "Your union rep called me because he couldn't reach you. He said they're declining to represent," he said. She paused, gathering herself. "He said, there's audio, and that you knew what you were doing." Patricia's face crumpled again, not in anger this time, in something rawer and less manageable, a grief that had no clean shape to it. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. "I know," Carol said, and then, after a moment, "But Pat, it was never just today, was it? It wasn't a question." Patricia said nothing. The charges against her were filed the following morning. Misuse of emergency aviation dispatch, filing a false security report, resisting a lawful order. The union's formal withdrawal of representation machine left her without coverage, and the attorney she reached by phone that evening quoted a retainer that made her stomach fall through the floor. SkyBridge's legal team sent the formal termination letter the same afternoon, citing 23 separate policy violations documented in the audio recording and the statements of 9 eyewitnesses. Her pension was frozen pending the outcome of the criminal proceedings, her flight benefits. The one tangible gift of a 26-year career in the air were revoked immediately. The background checks employers run these days are thorough. The news cycle is long. The internet, as it has become, does not forget. Patricia Voss would carry this day with her for the rest of her professional life. Not as a moment she survived, but as the moment she became the person she had perhaps always been capable of becoming, and the world had simply not been watching until now. The landing into Houston Hobby Airport was textbook smooth, the city spreading out below in its familiar sprawl of freeways and buyouts, and the glittering suggestion of downtown on the horizon. When the wheels touched down, the first-class cabin applauded again. This time it was simpler, fewer. Just gratitude for the landing, for the arrival, for the ordinary miracle of getting where you were going. But several people looked toward row 4 as they clapped, and what they communicated with that brief sideways attention was not pity or performance. It was recognition. Maya waited for the seatbelt sign to chime off, stood, and retrieved her carry-on from the overhead bin, where it had sat, perfectly sized and perfectly placed, through everything that had happened since she put it there. She walked off the aircraft holding it in her right hand, her portfolio tucked under her left arm. She stepped into the bright, wide concourse of the terminal and stopped for just a moment. Her phone was already vibrating with the weight of everything that had been accumulating while she was above the clouds. Her partner, her business manager, 3 journalists, her college roommate, the Houston Arts Council, who had apparently seen the video and were drafting a formal statement, and one contact saved simply as J.W. Whitfield, a brief message that read, "Safe landing. Looking forward to Monday." She stood in the middle of the concourse and let herself feel everything she hadn't allowed herself to feel on the plane. The fear that had lived in her chest since Patricia first blocked the aisle. The fury she had kept perfectly caged for over an hour. The profound, marrow-deep exhaustion of having to be that disciplined, that measured, that careful about how visible your anger is when everything happening to you is unjust, and you know it, and everyone watching knows it, and you still cannot afford the luxury of showing it. She let herself feel all of it, and then she let it go. She walked through the concourse, past the coffee kiosks and the gate monitors and the families waiting and the business people sprinting, and she walked out into the Houston afternoon with her contract in her bag and a business card in her pocket and a story she hadn't planned on carrying but would carry anyway, because that, too, was part of what it meant to be who she was. The sky above Houston was enormous and cloudless and very blue. Maya looked up at it for a moment. Then she put on her sunglasses, tightened her grip on the rolling suitcase that had started all of this, and walked toward the exit. She had a city to build. Some days, the universe asks you to endure something impossible, so that it can hand you something worth enduring for. The trick is to hold your ground long enough to find out what it is. Maya Collins held her ground. And the sky, as it turns out, has more than enough room for the people who deserve to be in it. Maya's journey is so much more than just a story about a turbulent flight. It's a mirror reflecting our own paths of personal growth. Watching her walk through the heart of Houston, we come to realize that true strength doesn't lie in lashing out wildly against injustice. It lies in the power of self-mastery, the ability to cage your fury in exchange for absolute clarity. She was brave enough to sit with her pain, to truly feel it, and then to gracefully let it go so she could move forward, knowing all too well that clinging to resentment only weighs you down. In the grand scheme of things, life's trials and prejudices are nothing more than a test of character. If you are resilient enough to navigate the sheer absurdity of it all, the universe will undoubtedly reward you with what you deserve. My friend, life might throw you into a few suffocating flights of your own, leaving you to face injustices that cut to the quick. But please remember, never surrender the right to be your own master. No matter how chaotic the world gets around you, your composure and your dignity are 2 things nobody can strip away unless you let them. Hold your ground, keep your head high, and channel that raw energy into building your own empire, rather than wasting it on the petty things that don't matter. Today, as we close this chapter, step outside, look up at the vast sky above, and remind yourself, I deserve the absolute best, and I will not back down. Slide those sunglasses on, tighten your grip, and step forward with unshakable confidence, because that wide open sky is out there, just waiting for you to conquer it.